Great, welcome to a joint workshop with the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board. Continuing our work on Chapter 38. Both boards have a quorum. So we'll take a look at the agenda, and we worked on some select board edits, just questions on what didn't make the didn't make the final edit. And Shelley, I think you were kind of spearheading that.
And Kristen's with us too.
Yes, Kristen is with us too. Hi, Kristen, welcome.
So we went over the code last time. Alright. So if I look on page 3806.
3806 in the revised.
Yep. Okay. So under point 8, it says they, third line down, after chapter. And my notes say that to change that to the CEO, and I didn't know if that was a change, if it was missed or.
I think we're avoiding pronouns as much as possible.
Okay.
And I think that was the intent.
Well, 9 would be the same as well.
Just not sure if they is referring to the code enforcement officer and planning board.
Well, so what they did, like in the point 2.1 paragraph, they start off with the code enforcement officer, and then later they just say they just have CEO just for the sake of, so that we could certainly add or have CEO identified instead of they. I have a notation as well.
And then like Chris had mentioned before, the point 9, it says they, but I had checked off that we had selected they. So I didn't know if it was just a difference between point 8 and point 9.
So is it just a simple correction, putting the CEO in place today? Is that it?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
And then on the same page, under point 2, it says within 10 days. I thought we had stated that we were looking at, is that 10 business days, 14 calendar days? We just asked to specify to assist so someone doesn't think it goes into the weekend.
Yeah, that was something we wanted, a definition of days, so it.
And I think some, in another part where I was reading, it did say, I think it said business days.
Is it in your definition you're supposed to have?
Yeah, it's not.
That's what we talked about. Add on to.
Not there yet. So adding the definition of days, I almost think. Yeah, just so it was consistent throughout.
Madam
So
Chairman,
Yes,
if you add that, you've got room to add that between corner lot and daycare center. We could say days constitutes business days, which obviously, if there's a holiday or anything, that kicks it automatically ahead, state holiday.
exactly.
So I think you should. I think Kristen would probably have a definition somewhere you can slide into that.
Yeah, and I don't think even business days is sort of vague. So I would say days in which the town office is open.
Good.
Okay.
All right, so that will be added to the,
I think that's a good policy.
right,
And then on 3807, whatever you do decide with days, it says underneath the third at the very top, it says 180 calendar days. Just so we're staying consistent.
I think if it's the exception, it would need to say calendar.
Yeah, and I think you could probably put that in your days definition, days unless otherwise stated is days of
Right.
town office.
It's just throughout the whole thing, we have.
Because I think calendar days, because you get into moratoriums and all those, and state guidelines, you want to follow what those say. Those
I
are-
would say in the definition, just unless otherwise specified for periods under or 14 or fewer days, it means business days, then otherwise it's calendar. That work?
that's-
I don't think anybody's thinking 30 days is, talking about business days.
Right.
I like that.
And on page 3808, under section 38.4.3, appeals and variances, under 1.1.1, it has that it's referring to the planning board. And the CEOs was also in there, both had been listed, so I didn't know if there was something specific to why that change was there.
Where are you again, Shelley?
I'm on page 3808.
Yep.
And I'm under section 38.4.3, appeals and variances.
Yeah.
And then under appeal 1.1. Or I should say.
Sorry, what was the question there?
So it had before, his question was, why remove the CEO? And then the planning board was there and it says both are listed below the question mark. So should it be more?
Are you asking if it should have both the planning board and the code enforcement officer, is that the question?
Well, it's the question is that before, I believe it said the CEO was part of that. In that same sentence, but then they were removed and then the planning board was added there.
So you made in a prior copy.
In a
it-
prior
it
copy,
had said
yeah.
CEO,
So
but
what
now
I'm
it
doing
says
is I'm
planning
just
board.
correcting the corrections from each version that we have.
So it does include the code enforcement officer,
Oh, I know what she's saying. That fourth line used to say code enforcement
Right.
and the administration of the ordinance. Because the planning board. If you don't like the planning board says, you appeal that to the zoning board of appeals. So you're wondering why that got changed from code enforcement to planning.
That's
What I
right.
just said.
So what I have in our very first draft here, where it stripes code enforcement officer and inserts in blue for new planning board. And then I have okay next to it.
Okay.
So it looks like we discussed it and that's my note from that one.
I don't love that orders and requirements or determinations, these sort of not final decisions would be appealable. So for instance, if the planning board wanted to continue a meeting till the next month and voted to do so, would somebody be able to appeal that? If they voted to hire an expert that the town's gonna, have the applicant pay for, could they appeal that? So I tend to like these to be pretty narrow and to just say, It's for decisions and determinations.
So to delete the reference to planning board altogether, Kristen?
No, keep planning board in there, but I would remove the words order, requirement, and or failure to act by. So that we're just down to decisions or determinations of the planning board.
Any questions for Kristen on that?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Chris.
so the first half, Kristen talks about the planning board, we'll limit that to decisions and determinations. Do you want in the second half, the CEO to that same standard? Because otherwise, all those other pieces are in there too.
Yep, I think the same.
So deleting requirement, leaving decision or determination made by.
Yes.
Because I agree, failure to act, all of a sudden you'll have a ton of, you could fill up the Code of Appeals for a year on some of these big ones.
So striking order, requirement, and failure to act. So and then those same words are repeated in the last sentence.
So we're striking it twice,
Striking it
those series of
twice.
words twice.
Yes,
But the last sentence is different.
it is different.
Yeah, the last sentence, I would leave all of those words in there.
Okay,
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's the prevent that
that's for
coming
the
to
board,
appeal.
yeah. All right, so we are striking it in two places, like you said, Ethan. All right. What else we got, shall we?
Do you know, say, okay, on page 3811, under the appeal procedure, there's, under 2, 1, and then I, it's like the second sentence, there shall be no appeal from decisions made by the code enforcement officer and the administration or enforcement of this ordinance. I have a note here that Bailey was going to review the state statute for that,
I do too.
and I don't have any notes where that was checked.
Well, I'll make that easy for you because we've already covered this in the provision we were just dealing with, so I think this can be stricken.
Okay.
The whole section, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yep.
You define administrative appeals above, right?
Right.
So we're striking the entire paragraph in .11. Is that what you're
Or
saying?
be all .2 because you defined administrative appeals above pretty clearly. I don't know, depends if you need to go into more detail.
We'll see what Kristen, what specifically are you recommending that be struck?
Yeah, I'm looking because the reference to an appeal being, such appeal being taken within 30 days of the date of the decision. This is like a common question, which is for a variance, are you expected to go and ask for the permit first and then get denied and then seek the variance? It's sort of a waste of time sometimes, but some towns do make the applicant go through that process so that a variance appeal is actually in sort of an appeal posture, in which case that 30 days matters. If we're not requiring an applicant to go in front of the planning board or the CEO and get denied before they come to a variance, then we would just take out this reference to variance in this section, if that makes sense, and just have it be about an administrative appeal must be taken by an aggrieved party within 30 days. Kind of cut out everything from aggrieved party to such an appeal.
So we are striking or variance in .2.1I, an administrative appeal may be taken to the Board of Appeals by an aggrieved party.
Within 30 days. And all of that would be, the rest would be as is. So an administrative appeal may be taken to the Board of Appeals by an aggrieved party within 30 days of the date of the official written decision, and so on. And then what I would do is in 2, say applications for administrative or variance appeals.
Applications for administrative
Or administrative appeal or appeals or variances.
variances shall be made.
And so should that point 2 actually at the top appeal procedure be actually point 8? Nope, it's number, never mind, it's number 2.
So you're inserting the 2 words or variances after appeals in point 1.
No, this is gonna, and this is in 2, so 2 now is going to say applications for administrative appeals or variances. And the first few words of 1 are going to be an administrative appeal may be taken.
Okay, just for housekeeping, earlier I referred to point 2, point 1, and then other people said I, so we're either gonna use Roman numerals as letters or we're gonna use them as numbers. Because I had to, Kristen, and then I got confused because people were switching to the alphabet on me.
I'll say little I, or if you want to be formal, we can say Roman. In any event, so a little I would be an administrative appeal may be taken to the Board of Appeals. Little I would be applications for administrative appeals or variances. Actually, if someone's in control of this and can let me share my screen, I might be able to pop edits up as I make them.
Stand by. Try that. See that.
And send us this, right? So we're not trying to.
Yeah. And we keep going. Okay.
What else we gonna show? I just have under the 3 little I's, okay. Upon receiving the application for administrative appeal or a variance, the code enforcement officer or planning board, as appropriate, shall transmit to the Board of Appeals all the papers constituting the record of this decision from. Should we have a certain time period in there? Because then it segues into 4, or the next one. You know, they've got 35 days from the date of receipt of this. So I didn't know if there should be within a certain number of days added to the 3 little I's.
I'd be careful on that, because if you mess that up, then you create another problem. Because usually if it's got the zoning board of appeals, there's contention already. And if you get into defining, and that could be something a crafty lawyer later would say, you didn't send it in the right amount of days, and create another faction of appeal. That's all I'm saying. So if it's, because I think it's hard to, depending on, get half the packet, what constitutes enough of the package that you gotta deliver it to them.
So it's all of the papers constituting the record of the decision.
I don't
It
know.
was just, I mean, everything else just seems to have a bit of a, for the purpose of flow and getting business done. It just seems to be, there seems to be other requirements to turn things in. It's just an observation, people can think about it.
We could have something a little bit looser, like shall in a timely fashion,
Right. I like that.
and then timely is sort of informed by the next paragraph.
I like that.
And we get some flexibility to the staff, because we don't know what kind of volume we'll have in the future.
Okay, we've butchered 3811.
Alright, so page 3816. Under section 38.6.5. And under number 1, number 5, about areas within 250 feet. So I have here where definition relative to shoreland, wetland. Bailey was going to review, because Steve had a concern about this.
Shelley, where are you again? I'm sorry.
That's okay. On page 3816.
Okay, thank you.
Under the district purposes, number 1.5. I just have here with the definition for shoreline, Steve had a concern. I can't remember exactly what the details of that was. I don't know if it was the footage.
I think it's the horizontal distance, I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
What constitutes measuring the horizontal distance?
Right.
That is a term of art under the shoreline zoning ordinance, like under chapter 1000 of DEP rules. And I don't think it needs to be defined. It's complicated because how do you measure the starting point along the shore? And there's a whole body of law about how you do that. Too complicated to explain here, but horizontal basically means going from the closest point of the shore outward or inward, I should say, sort of perpendicular to the shoreline.
Right. Kristen, could we reference the statute on that as defined by MRSA, blah, 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 or,
I'm not sure that it is defined as the thing.
okay.
I can look while we're talking, see if it's in chapter 1000.
I was just thinking whenever we can revert to state definitions, it's better, right?
For sure.
Alrighty. What do you got next?
Okay, page 3824. Under general requirements, section 38.6.8. Number 2, with the 600 square feet of living space on one level. Someone had a concern that that was too big and it was expensive, and felt that we should make that more reasonable for affordable housing.
I remember that, but we haven't. I I know, did you have, Rebecca, did you have anyone that at your meetings that expressed concerns about the large, what they perceived as large, minimum required space? Yeah, we certainly did. And
I think the thought was the tiny home stuff, and I know that at least there's one project I know here in town that could probably convert into dwelling units if that was adjusted.
yeah, we didn't vote or act on it at all, but it was something we were going to come back to and talk, see if anyone had any thoughts on whether it's wise to reduce that or not.
So Carl and I recently had an issue on this where there was an application for a tiny home, and I want to say it was 400 square feet. And the state law now says you shall allow a tiny home in any district or any place where single family homes are allowed. And it defines a tiny home as anything under 450 square feet. So what I told Carl was that even though we have this provision in our ordinance about the 600 square feet, the state law actually makes us permit a tiny home up to 450 square feet anywhere that you allow a single family residence. But then we have this weird donut hole between 450 square feet and 600 square feet in the town of Rangeley where the state law doesn't cover it. And weirdly, you could have up to 450, but you can't have between 450 and 600. So I guess the options here are, we still have more thinking and talking to do, I think, about tiny homes and ADUs and the new law requiring, more density. And so I don't know if we want to kind of put a pin in this and come back to it after we've had that discussion, or if we're not going to have any more discussion on that, I think my recommendation would be to just nix this, because the state law basically covers this and makes us do it up to 450.
So you would strike number 2 entirely.
Right.
Yes, go ahead,
I've been
please.
researching this a little bit. What you'd be concerned about is when you put a second dwelling on the property, and you have to follow in on the height requirements, and does that second dwelling meet the requirements for septic systems? So somebody just can't put a second dwelling, and it should be written in that bylaw that you can't just put a second dwelling without height requirements and septic, meets the septic requirements.
So this would be under the accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is gonna come up in the main state law, and that's what they're fighting right now.
Yeah.
D 2003.
Yeah, and that is on, I think it is on the agenda. Because Kristen has certainly is aware, and she'll kind of educate us all, but make sure you keep that note. So if we get to that, make sure not to miss that point.
So the question I have then is, Kristen, is you're basically saying that because state law conflicts with that we might as well strike it, because otherwise it's gonna get stricken anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if we leave out that whole paragraph entirely, but then we define the,
First statement.
it does, because otherwise you get this weird spot between 450 and 600 that.
Yeah, no,
It's just gonna take a
Kristen,
matter of time, somebody's gonna come in and say, well, how come you can do 450 and how come I can't do?
well, that's exactly what Kristen just said.
Yeah, and I actually did say to Carl when we talked about this, I think for fairness, so we don't have an equal protection problem, we would have to allow, kind of read out this provision of our ordinance anyway right now, because it would be completely unfair and irrational to say, oh, you can have 300, but you can't have 500.
So how does the planning board feel? Or do you want to come back to it?
Go, I think with what she says, I mean, if it's, I agree with her, there is a gray area there. Yeah.
Okay, all right, so any concerns with the Board of Selectmen?
So if we're gonna strike that out, are we inserting state statute in its place? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, you don't need to, because the statute applies regardless. So basically, you know, a single family home is a single family home. I'm not sure what purpose it would serve to have in there, and I think we're at risk of the state law being amended one way or the other, and then them being out of sync.
Well, unless somebody goes to ask that question, what's the requirement for the smallest house I can build, they have nowhere to look to find it, unless they go to
Right.
state code, we don't have anything in there.
Well, I think what we might want to do is define tiny home and define it in accordance with the statute. And we could have a provision that just says the exact same thing that the state law says.
We just reference the state law?
So adding a new definition to the, you know, to this chapter of tiny home.
Right. Because there is more than just a house under 450 square feet. It has to be manufactured according to the Manufactured Housing Board standards, constructed on a chassis, et cetera.
Ethan?
Okay, so for it to be 450 or under, it has to have those requirements you just stated. But like Noel said, how does somebody know what size stick-built house they can stick on a plot?
I guess
There's
that's
just simply not a restriction.
where the code enforcement officer comes in.
All right.
Yeah, but they can't require something that doesn't exist.
But it exists in state law.
We should reference it.
I agree with that.
All right, so
Why don't we just? Yeah, anyway.
My suggestion would be to define tiny home the same way the statute says. And then somewhere, we have to find where, say, tiny homes, a tiny home will be permitted only if it meets the definition set forth in this ordinance and state law. So then we're sort of changing the minimum to 450. And sorry, I think what it should say is a home under 450 square feet of living space will be permitted only if it meets the definition of a tiny home.
Right, yeah, so why don't, what's the
So-
problem with writing in here that instead of the number being 600, the number's 450 in this section? And then deal with tiny homes and tiny homes. That's, I mean, we're making it complicated for regular people.
I think we want this to be a good reference for folks is more or less, you know, what came from our last meeting with both groups. Shelley, you had your hand up?
So question in regards to tiny homes. So do they have to be, if they're on wheels, are they technically a tiny house?
Yes.
They're mobile.
Oh,
It's a mobile.
That's
I looked that up. Yeah.
don't you-
So could we do like what they require for mobile homes is to require the wheels and the axle be taken off in order to be classified as a house?
What difference does it make to be classified as the house? Because the whole purpose of the statute is to sort of treat tiny homes with wheels, with chassis, whatever, the same as single family homes, stick-built homes.
Well, then that brings up another, because I believe, and you can correct me, but anything built in Rangeley needs a foundation under it, correct?
Yes.
So we're
So
opening
it
up
all
another
falls
can
back
of
on,
worms.
back on septic systems, and does your property meet the septic system requirements and the offsets?
Maximum restrictions in the statute, really.
Exactly.
And with a mobile
So you
home,
can't just pull your camper on your property and hook it to your septic system, move your in-laws in and say, this is a tiny home.
What we're
So
talking,
I threw up on the screen the definition of tiny home. I don't know if it's big enough for you to see.
I think contrast isn't good enough.
tiny home means a living space permanently constructed on a frame or chassis designed for use as permanent living quarters that A, complies with American National Standards Institute Standard A 11.5 or on plumbing, propane free, free fire and life safety and construction or National Fire Protection Association Standard 1192 on plumbing, propane, fire, and life safety or recreational vehicles. B, does not exceed 400 square feet in size. C, does not exceed any dimension allowed for operation on a public way under this title. And D, is a vehicle without motive power.
So it's intended to be on
wheels,
wheels.
which comes back to our building,
Transient.
our building code where everything's supposed to be on a foundation. It's gonna be a structure in this town.
So I'm wondering, so Kristen, if tiny home is its own category, then the residential guidelines are for your traditional home.
That's what I was thinking.
So that the state has created its own,
You create your own thing
Parameter.
for tax purposes and making revenue.
So that says 400 square feet, but then up above you drafted in 450.
Yeah. Well, 459 was definitely a typo, but
Oh, I wasn't sure if there was a different.
450 was an error of memory, so it's 400,
Yeah.
not 50.
So we've got two options, either we leave it at 600, someone comes and fights us between the 4 and 6. Or we switch everything to 400.
I like to switch everything to 400
That's
and have it read what it says. So basically, we're only allowing,
20 by 20.
one voice, let Kristen talk.
we're only allowing these where state law makes us up to 400. And then if you're over 400, you're okay.
What's everybody hates so much about a 20 by 20 house?
Well,
Just for reference.
Nothing wrong with the 20 by 20 house. I'm actually involved in building them on the mountain. We building 4 different styles. I'm all approving the 20 by 20, 400 square feet. What the issue is going to be coming up, and it's going to come up with the new guidelines, which you're going to have another meeting on, is the state is going to allow you to put a separate dwelling on your property.
Yeah.
And that's what this is all kind of interconnecting with. So what you have to be aware of is, like I said before, the height requirements, septic design. And you have to, if somebody wants to put a separate dwelling on the property, it's going to fall under a tax bracket, which the people are going to have to know that obviously you're up in the value of property, and that has to somehow come into play with all this.
All right, so
This
Yes.
needs, no,
go ahead.
this needs to be looked at further. I mean, we really need to go in depth with this, we're bringing in tiny homes. Basically, right now, if we scrap this 600 square foot rule. You're telling me I can bring in a tiny house, put it on my lot and live there for the rest of my life. On blocks, on a trailer, but I can't go and build a 1,000 square foot house on my lot on posts and piers.
It sounds like that's what state law is allowing.
I know, so we have to maybe make its own code for tiny homes. Anything more than a tiny home, keep this 600 square foot thing in here. That way you can actually have, if we're gonna keep the whole foundation and installation, rules that we already have. You know what I mean? You see where I'm kind of going with that?
No.
No. Well, if I can have a tiny home on my house, right? If I can have a tiny home on my lot.
Yeah.
That is there permanently and I can live in it, but it's only 450 square feet, can be on post and pad. How come I can't build a 1,000 square foot house on my lot on post and pad?
So you're saying a different ordinance or different code or have it?
Have its own section,
A
I think.
section,
For a tiny.
yes,
But we should probably keep that for.
and just put something like exception is tiny home, C, or
Exactly.
tiny home section.
Yes.
Chris?
I have a tendency to leave what we have with the 600 and then just say, unless it's otherwise defined by state law, because this ADU stuff is gonna get duped out this January in in the legislature. Depending on what the makeup of the legislature is how it's gonna shake out, and we need to move forward to get this 38 wrapped up. I just think that if we're gonna do that, this whole tiny home and ADU thing should almost be a separate ordinance that deals with it and get it out of this so we can keep on, because we could debate this ad nauseum, and I tell you what, we change that 600 to 450, it's another tick that people won't support getting 38 through. They're gonna think, if I was running a no campaign on 38, I'd say, look, they just changed that from 600 to 450. You gotta vote down this ordinance, we can keep the 600. Even though, which Kristen will say, it's not gonna be enforceable. But in the head, when you think of politic wise, we're not gonna get all the other things that we really need to get done in 38. I'm just saying, it's not a hill to die on. And if we put a clause in there that says, unless otherwise defined in ordinance or state law, we can move on from this. And then that is something that can be dealt with on the code enforcement level on a one-on-one basis, following consistent what we receive from council, because I don't think anything's gonna be finalized on the impacts LD 2003 until sometime in the spring. I don't know what Kristen thinks, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think there are going to be a fair amount of changes to it. I don't expect sweeping changes, though. It was so hard fought last year, and there were so many compromises at the last minute that watered it down to where it is. I think the legislature was weary of doing that much more.
But the rules aren't set yet, correct? Only through the law, but they haven't set all the rulemaking still gotta be done, correct?
I don't know of any rulemaking that has to be done on the provisions that matter to us. About ADUs, for instance, and density.
So what about the proposal of leaving it the same unless it's otherwise defined by state law and ordinance? Is that too cloudy, or is that good enough so we can keep 38 intact and move on?
Explain to me a little bit more how you would use the unless is otherwise defined.
I'm saying that tiny homes are gonna be, are defined by state law, correct?
Right.
So that allows an exception to the 600 square foot, very specific guidelines on that are outlined.
Yes.
So if we say the minimum is 600 square feet unless otherwise defined under state law, then somebody wants to advocate for a tiny home, pulls out that provision and goes and makes that argument. The average person that comes in, we're able to keep at the 600 square feet. I don't care. If people want to go less, we can go less. I mean, I'm not overly worried about a 20 by 20 structure. If it's built safe and done correctly, then, you know, that's fine. That's a camp for some people. And, you know, it's really expensive now to build. So, but I also am concerned about the ADU piece and the tiny home piece, because I think that's gonna materially change a lot of what we're dealing with in other areas. So my thought is to try to push that into a separate ordinance or separate structure and kind of stick to what we've kind of traditionally had in that section. Doesn't mean it can't be defined otherwise. I mean, the planning board can look at a proposal if somebody wants to build a village of tiny homes. If they meet those requirements and do those things, they can approve that because that's done by state law and it's different than what we have defined here. We can put in a what I call a pressure relief valve there in that section that covers that.
Yeah,
You can word it however you want.
No, I get the political concern about this, and all of this is a big question, and there are some changes that might come out of this session. So I am completely okay with leaving this there, understanding that if something meets the definition of a tiny home that's under 400 square feet, they're going to get in by operation of state law, and we've got this, you know, we have to make a game time decision on anything in between. But I think that's fine, and then we could wait and see if this gets adopted in June, and then if we need changes to respond to LD 2003 and all of this stuff, we can put them in over the summer and get it on the November ballot. So I don't think I'd change anything. I guess I'd just leave it as is unless we're really going to take a crack at this.
Leave it as originally read, the black and black.
Yeah, just keep it exactly as it was.
We could, I mean, we could, just based on some feedback we got, I mean, we could consider lowering it to 500 square feet, 25 by 25 foot home. I don't know how. It's because of the expense of. Just putting it out there.
This is gonna become an issue, so with what's going on in the mountain, and I've already got 3 phone calls from 3 different people buying property here. And they're already researching what the mountain's doing, and then they're bringing it back to the town saying, well, they're asking me, what is the regulations for cluster tiny homes if I buy 10 acres of property? Just throwing it out there for, it's gonna be an issue.
That would come to a planning board, right?
Yeah, Rebecca.
I'm in agreement with him about pushing chapter 38 through. The planning board at the last meeting was given some information on LD 2003, and that is going to be our next focus. So updating the chapter 38, like she said, for November vote. Because there is a lot to it.
Yeah. Mark, you had your hand up?
Well, I think the state's gonna provide the guidance for this tiny home thing. And as far as the 600 square feet, at the meetings I attended when the Board of Selectmen reviewed chapter 38, there was only one person in the public that and was there several occasions, but that thought the 600 feet was excessive. I don't think there was a big groundswell of people that felt that way, but the one person did it 2 or 3 different meetings. That's my recollection anyway.
All right, so no changes to number 2, Shelley.
So I'm just, one of the places I'm thinking of is up where the red houses are, up on the hill before, by the IGA. How big is one of those? Like, what is the size?
I didn't know them.
No, but I'm just
They
saying,
vary, they vary in
they do
size.
vary in size, but they're not
Those are all
very big.
built prior
They're
to.
great.
Yeah,
So
they don't,
They're a conversion.
it's like talking about the ones in Barrel Terrace down by
yeah,
Haley Pond.
Right.
And that was my thought about,
Maybe they're small.
yeah, but because Rangeley's always had camps like that with, hip roofs and such, on small plots. And,
I mean, they're condominiums, they're condominiumized, structures. So it would
But I
be
mean, it's
exempt
not, I
from,
mean, they're not very big, but they're, I mean, they're a decent size, so I
This
don't
is
know.
all done prior.
Hmm?
This is all done prior, this is done.
No, I'm just saying for an example, like, is that size, what, does anyone know what that size would be for that type? Because it's basically a 1-bedroom, I mean, in one of the units was 1 bedroom. I'm just trying to picture 600 square feet.
1 bedroom with little
One,
loft,
and
I
a
guess.
little bathroom and a little loft on top. I mean, it's not an awful lot, but someone just starting out, it might be.
That's how I feel
Start
about it.
all right, so there are no changes to, what are you thinking?
Well, just for reference, this room's probably 20 feet wide and 30 feet long, that's 600 square feet.
Right, that's good reference.
Yeah.
It is, that's 20 by 20.
Okay,
I did make one little change, if you can see it on the screen. I think residential structure could be interpreted to mean anything that's used for residential purposes, though it's not a dwelling. So I think it might be clear to say no structure shall be constructed, converted, or placed for use as a residential dwelling, which contains less than 600 square feet.
okay. Thank you, Kristen. All right, what have you got next, Shelley?
All right, on page 3825. Under section 38.7.3, it shows high water line. And then I have where it was referenced horizontal distance, where is that? Should it say high water line or should it say horizontal distance?
This is the same language as the state's rules, so I would keep it as is.
All the shoreland is.
Okay.
Perfect.
I think it was Steve's thing.
Yeah, I think you're right.
On page 3841. Note that Bailey wanted permits. It's just not side notes on this whole entire section. I'm assuming it's for the trees. A 10-year plan, who checks the 10-year plan? A tracking report, maybe in Trio to put the on the property card. I'm assuming it's for the tree growth. Like who checks the forestry plans or something like that.
I think it was for the sake of change of ownership, so
Okay.
if, yeah, for that was discussed, and
What's the question, Shelley? I was reading through it.
So we just had notes, I just had a note on the sideline that Bailey had wanted like a permit. I didn't know if that should be, if she was thinking that it should be specifically in this section. And she also said the 10-year plan, who's planning on checking that? And then having a tracking report of some sort.
this has to do with the removal of trees
Mhm.
and the,
I think it only has to do with removal of trees in the
Right.
resource protection area, though. Am I reading that right?
Mark, you mentioned something? I think
Mark
remembers.
said
Yeah, I remember this conversation there. See, in the shoreline zone, you're allowed to remove 40% of the volume of trees in a 10-year period. And Bailey's concern was, who's tracking this 10-year period? Someone owns it, they take their 40%. 2 years later, a new owner comes, they take their 40%. 2 years after that, you got another owner that takes 40%. Next thing you know, you don't have any buffer between the water and the thing, so that the law doesn't amount to protecting the quality of the water from the,
yeah, that's
Use,
exactly
so-
it.
that's what she was concerned with, the way to monitor that. In that conversation, someone said, well, maybe the assessor could make notes of that, but I don't know how applicable that is. That would be something you'd have to talk about with them. But anyway, that was the gist of
That's right, thank you.
her concern.
Okay, so if you are clearing or removing vegetation in resource protection or shoreland zones, the table of uses says you need a permit from the CEO. And so they do need to come in and get a permit. That application or the permit's going to detail what they're allowed to cut and would be in the file so that the next time someone comes in to get a permit to do more clearing, or they don't get a permit and they do more clearing in violation, you have something to go back and add it up to. So I'm not sure why that wouldn't cover it.
Thank you, Kristen. All right, what else you got?
Well, I have a question on
Oh,
that.
yeah, go ahead.
So the one owner, like Mark says, one owner owns it, does this 40%. So the next guy buys it and you're gonna tell him he can't do 40% more because he's a new owner and they've already done the 40% in the 10-year window. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, a tax on.
Which
You're
means,
gonna make that very clear, the person is buying that piece of property.
yeah, that should be in, that should,
It should be in.
the real estate agent should
Yeah.
have, should you, know they have to have that.
Well, and make sure that it's in writing so the real estate agent knows that,
Right.
that that's the case.
Well, it'd be a permit. From the code enforcement officer. It should be a permit.
It should be a permit.
It should be a permit.
Mark?
I been around quite a bit of that over the last 40 years, and I don't know many people that have come and applied for a permit. They just assume that, you know,
Right.
they're allowed to cut
100%,
40%, they're gonna go cut their 40%. I don't think there's, if you can check the records, but I don't believe there's been a lot of people pulling permits for that.
No,
So that, and I think that was Bailey's concern.
Yeah.
That at the present time, there is no tracking system for it. Even if a permit required, there was no enforcement to go.
Yeah, they
So-
would, a neighbor would have to rat out.
Yes,
someone.
exactly. So what it ends up being is the neighbor that, or someone that notices, that knows
Tells
something that said, that tells.
So then there's no permit of record. Just,
That's why the assessor thing probably came up, because he goes around and looks at stuff. That would be the opportunity to take
Right,
photographs and check things out.
so that's how that came up, that's right too. Is they go around, they make their property checks. I guess just something to bank for, you know, a future discussion. Just looking at Kristen's modifying, clearing.
A lot of towns have a provision like what I'm typing, that just says straight up, all cutting of trees shall require a permit. I mean, the chart says that as well, but saying it again wouldn't be the worst.
So that's going under 0.15.
0.1,
1.
and of course, we have to renumber everything that follows.
What else have you got, Shelley?
All right, so I have under, on page 3850, under section 38.8.2 lighting. One of the things that was notated is, in the notes, is lighting in different zones. Daytime versus nighttime. That's, one of my notes. I don't know if there was, we're looking for maybe a clear just definition of those.
All right, sorry, what page are you on?
3850, under lighting.
Okay, and what's the question?
So one of the questions that came up in one of our meetings was, maybe doing a lighting on, in different zones. And then, daytime versus nighttime lighting definitions.
That have to do with keys. Did that fall, did that segue into signage?
Yes, right, because the lighting had to go down
But during the day,
during, yes.
it wouldn't matter, is what they would.
Right.
Before I forget about this, in 3.1 II, why do we care whether it's white mini lights? If somebody has red lights on their trees, arguably they got a problem.
Yeah,
I don't see the need to do different standards in different zones. I think there's enough flexibility here.
So you're going back to 3.1, the striking white and just leaving it as string lengths.
Yeah,
All right. What have you got next, Shelley?
Let's see. Let's do that. Change that.
All right, so on page 3853, under section 38.8.5, sanctuary provisions. It's on the third line down. It says and town of Rangeley. If you just put the in there, I'll be good. Sorry.
3.5, top of the page.
And town of Rangeley sewer. And town of Rangeley sewer. Sewer. Something.
I think the in front of state carries over into town, but happy to do it.
Okay. And then, oh, I've got all these notes from last time about mobile homes.
Which is the next thing.
Which is the next thing. Under, on page 3857. Under section 38.9.6 cluster development. Someone was gonna check with AvCog to be clear on that section for cluster development. Should check with AvCog to be clearer. This section applies to new development and not to lots with existing structures. And then woodland zone, it says not restricted but meets size requirement. That's just what I have for notes on that of what we've discussed. So I didn't know if Bailey had a chance to check with AvCog.
Well, Tom said he worked with AvCog on chapter 38, so closely.
Yes.
I know that Lee had some concerns about this section, cluster development, but he's not here to speak to that, so. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so let's do it. On page 3859. It talks about stormwater runoff. If the town takes it over, does that equal public use with a question mark?
Where are you?
On page 3859. In regards to stormwater runoff.
I don't see it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just have it on notes on the sidelines for that as part of a discussion in the section.
Carried over from-
We're not seeing stormwater.
Okay.
Seeing stormwater runoff reference.
So maybe it was just part of the discussion where if it was.
Yeah, it was just
If
part
it
of
was a
it.
cluster
In the
development,
cluster
it would
development,
be a large plot of land
someone just asked about.
with buildings, catching
Water.
water and dumping them off, and maybe
Right.
someone had a concern about it, but I don't recall. What was the part about the town taking it over?
So just the question was, if the town, with the stormwater runoff, if the town takes it over and that equals does that equal public use?
The town takes over the cluster development.
I think there's a reference in the cluster development that they have to have a common area. And within that, within it, it states as to whether it would be town maintained and with therefore it would require public use. And I remember that being kind of confusing when we were discussing that why would a cluster development with folks, owning their own homes and having deeded access to this common area, why would,
Yeah, we have plenty of HOAs that have common use.
yeah, it's required according to, the cluster development section. So I think it was just,
I think it was just a general
just a question, yeah, just a question as to why.
I think it's under 0.6 Roman 1. dedication of
Yeah,
such
dedication of such open space to public use if the town or other public agency has indicated it will accept such dedication. I don't think it made sense to us.
So it's on the previous page.
3858.
Yeah.
0.6 little I.
I think I remember writing this or rewriting it many years ago. A lot of times, big developers, and I see this a lot more, on the coast, is they will come in and say, we're going to develop this land and we're going to give this to you as a public park to further incentivize this project. So that it's not just available for our residents, it's available for the whole town. So it's good to preserve that option.
Okay.
There may be a development where it really is of benefit to the town.
Didn't think of it that way. Thank you.
Okay.
Mark.
On Shelley's note about the, let's see, I remember Steve Philbrick's concern on the woodland zone was the one dwelling per 10 acres. He didn't feel that that contributed anything towards efficient use of land and thought that needed to be revisited. And I think that's what Shelley's note referring on the woodland zone thing was referring to, Steve's concerns about that. That was on 3857, I think, number 2. 382962. And Christian pointed out earlier in this review, not tonight, but that the woodland zoning seems to be a bit of a confusion in the comprehensive plan. It talks about it one way, but its historical application has been a catch-all for things that don't fit in other zones, and that probably time to come to grips with that and figure out just if there's like woodland 1, woodland 2, different, not all. I mean, you've got like 8,000 acres in half the towns in the woodland zone, and some of it is commercial timberland, and some of it, is, just stretches, between the airport and the transfer station and things like that. That has a lot of residential development, and mixed uses and that type of thing. So Same thing along Route 4 between the Quasic and Rangeley, there's, once you get back so far, that's a lot of woodland zone that, you know, it might be time to look at the stuff that that's presently zoned woodland that may be more suitable for, more development and have certain set of that, and then the true woodland stuff, the commercial timberland and that, you know, have different set of criteria for that, so that it's more consistent there in its use and makes it easier for the code enforcement officer and the planning board and everyone else to administer.
I have a note here beside that in our first go around, more specific. And I think, I mean, given it's in the woodland zone, I think it's just stating that a cluster development has to be a minimum of 10 acres. The 1 unit's confusing.
Yeah,
I think that's what we had kind of gotten hung up on, is 1 unit. It show the density. I mean, it should be more than 1 development, cluster development per 10 acres,
Okay.
if that's the intent.
is that what you means one development?
That's what I'm wondering if
Right,
that
no,
the
that's a good
intent.
point. Because you could put 1 600 square foot house on that 10 acres and just have a nice woodland, 1 20,000 square foot house. So it must, since it's in cluster development, I would assume that 1 unit means
One
one development.
cluster development.
Sorry, 1 cluster development per 10 acres?
Yeah,
No, I don't think that's what it's intended to be. I think it's intended to be 1 dwelling unit per 10 acres.
Really?
wow.
So you could have a 20,000 square foot house on that 10 acres, you could have a 600 square foot.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well just say, there shall be no cluster developments in the woodland zone.
Right. Let's check the land use table that we just approved. Let's see it. It's restricted. Now, cluster developments aren't in the land use table, so. So would you,
Add it.
yeah. Or ban them from the woodland district?
So what's the minimum lot size in that district?
8,000?
80,000 square feet.
Yeah. It just makes no sense. In a non-clustered development, you'd have in 10 acres, you could have 5. Cluster is supposed to increase density.
Right, yeah, it is, it's supposed to increase density.
I mean, we could say that they shall have at least 10 acres in the development. Maybe that was the intention. It just isn't worded that way.
Right. Does the planning board have a preference on, you know, what your thoughts are with kind of the options that Kristen's mentioned? Either striking it from woodland zone or having the cluster development in the woodland zone, a minimum of 10 acres, but again, it's supposed to increase density.
I think Kristen's right that the intent was there, that the wording's wrong, because further on in the sentence, it says, so 1 unit per 10 acres and be developed, and you don't develop 1 unit,
Mhm.
you build.
According to the standards.
Also, the bare minimum should say all cluster developments.
Right, that's true.
Unless really maybe that's what it was trying to do, is to say, not even as a cluster. Period. If you're doing it, you can have a single family home on 2 acres. But if you're trying to do a subdivision or something in the woodland, it has to be 1 per 10 acres, but that just seems crazy too.
Mhm.
I mean, the thing is, cluster development is intended to cluster the development so that there's more open space, which actually does serve the purposes of the woodland zone to keep it rural and open and leave these recreational opportunities. So it seems to me that cluster is a good fit, but maybe we just want to make sure that they're big clustered developments, so there's a big opportunity for open space. So that would, I think, weigh towards all developments in the woodland zone, all cluster developments in the woodland zone shall be at least 10 acres and be developed in accordance with the standards, which, I don't know if the intention was to make all development in the woodland be clustered. Some towns definitely do that in their rural zones. So maybe it's intentional that they didn't put the word cluster here.
So maybe they were intending that a property owner that owns 100 acres could only put 10 units in on that 100 acres to keep everything well spaced. And then does unit include outbuildings? Does that fall someplace else?
That doesn't make any sense the way it is.
No.
Yeah, if there's this many questions being asked with all of us in this room, then it at the very least needs to be reworded, and we have to decide exactly what the intent was and what our intent is going to be from here forward.
So Kristen's working on some edits. Mark?
Would you need to review the woodland zone in general before you decided what the best, which way you'd want the cluster to work in it? And when I was just thinking this, the 80,000 square feet per dwelling unit. Is it presently 40,000 and this new change asked it to go to 80,000? Has it originally been 40,000 and under these proposed changes it's increasing to 80?
You mean state changes? Is that what you're
No,
talking
no,
about?
town. I think that, because at one time I know it was 40,000 square feet. And I think this 80,000 may just be the new proposal.
Yeah, it was 40,000.
Presently
Minimum lot
40.
size 40,000.
Yes.
So I ran across this a couple times in my endeavors over the years. We put subdivisions in, but you put them in a cluster area that it has to be worded in a way that if you bought, say, 50 acres and you want to put X amount of houses in, then you have to maintain X amount of land use and not cut down timbers for that amount of property and that many homes. So you have to word it in a way that's makes sense. So if you could have 3 cul-de-sacs in on X amount of property with X amount of houses, you would have to, that person buying that property wants to develop that land has to maintain X amount of woodland area to suit that many pieces of property.
And that kind of goes with what Mark is saying. I think it's like, we should probably take a step back and the comprehensive plan touches base on the woodland zone. And it's,
I mean, the way it's set up, it's pretty much saying that nobody can live in a wooded area unless they have a considerable amount of means. We got a lot of woods, a lot of places to live.
is that your suggested final edit, Kristen? For point two?
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's a policy question for sure. So if the policy is, we want to do what some of these towns do where it's a rural area and make sure that developments are able to preserve as much open space as possible, which makes sense for woodland. I think this is the way you word it.
Yeah.
The comprehensive plan doesn't use the word cluster, I'm finding, so we're not going to get a lot of guidance there. And the description of forest, of woodland doesn't say really that much about what development should look like in it. Because it's really, again, going back to this disconnected, woodland was supposed to be sort of largely undeveloped.
Mark?
Not to keep repeating myself, I think the problem the town faces though is that there's too many acres zoned woodland for a one size fits all. I think there's a variation in the types of land that are presently zoned woodland. And maybe, they need to be like a woodland 1, 2, 3, something. It needs to be dealt with somehow. Yeah, so that it's not just a one size fit all on that huge amount of acreage, because it's not going to serve the town well, I don't think.
Right. I think it also goes back to the zoning, where a lot of that should be moved into other zones completely.
And so that's definitely, definitely something that, we can explore down the road. I think for the sake of moving on, we've got this suggested change, we'll be having another meeting and can edit this more if the planning board comes back after, after discussing this more, or, the selectmen, and we can adjust accordingly. So let's move on from this. This definitely is a better worded sentence than what currently exists.
Can I interrupt real quick and just
Yes.
throw out there that I noticed in the comp plan just now, it says the woodland district is supposed to be 40,000 square foot minimum lot size. So if we say 80 here, it is technically in conflict. Just want to make sure everybody's aware of that.
I'm trying to remember why we changed it to 80. I think it was to put less development in there.
Well, it makes total sense. It just conflicts with the comp plan.
And
So I would like to see some attention to the comp plan between now and June, and see if we could push through at least some stuff that helps keep things matching up. And I don't think it should be that hard to do. It doesn't have to be a huge overhaul. Just take a little surgical look at this.
sounds like a good idea. It's probably gonna, we can't seem to get folks to join the comprehensive plan review committee, so it's probably gonna fall back, on the selectmen, planning board with, what you've got assigned to.
I think we may need like a pro tempore member, because it has to be a comp plan that makes the recommendation.
Okay,
So maybe we just appoint somebody temporarily to push this through to the selectmen, who then put it on the warrant.
okay. All right, well, I
I'll
guess
bring some recommendations to the board's meeting on Monday.
that'd be great. All right, so we'll make note on that, that matter with the comp plan. All right, what else have you got, Shelley?
So I'm curious what you said about the clusters. Do you think that should be more revamped? Is that, yes? And be more,
Worded in a
are you
certain
thinking
way.
more specific? Are you? I'm just curious
Yeah, you
because,
want to specify how big the lots are, and if somebody buys X amount of property, how much property they have to use for undeveloped, they can't develop it. But you also don't want to not be able to develop the property and make the town grow, have taxes and all that good stuff.
But specifically in the woodland zone, you're talking that there should be some preservation of trees and.
Or they have to give back, so if they put a development in and they're not diverting the water properly, they have to put in whatever retaining ponds that they have to restore or use. You can't just develop property and cut a road in and not have the water and the
is.
Isn't that, I think that's,
It's
I mean,
required
that's,
anyways.
yeah, that's a part of a oh no, or the requirements of an approved subdivision plan for phosphorus control that the planning board would review.
And do they do like an environmental? I mean, I know when we did the airport, we had to get an environmental to make sure.
I think we're off topic.
No, I'm just saying, like, is that something we could require as an additional condition?
I think
before
with
they-
any
They would have to do it
subdivision it
anyway.
is.
Do you do that?
There's a whole list of things that are required.
So I'm on page 3860.
Before we go,
Yes, yes.
sorry, but back on question, cluster development, can we put in like I know there's development area definitions, but there isn't cluster development, would that, for reference, is that
In the table, do you mean?
in the back of the?
In the glossary and
definitions?
cluster. Cluster
There's
development.
development, but there's a cluster development for people to. Is that, I don't know.
Yeah, so Kristen, we've got a selectman suggesting that cluster development be added to the glossary for more clarification.
For a definition,
Yes,
Yeah, I mean, there is, I mean, just looking on Google or whatever.
there's some,
Not that somebody couldn't do that themselves, but, you know.
I'm just curious where else it might, let me take a quick look and see if it appears anywhere outside of, this kind of substantive section about it.
okay. So while Kristen is checking that, what is your next?
Okay, so on
observation?
page 3860, at the very top, and where it says where open space lands are to be offered to the town, the open space requirement shall not be considered. I have a question of, that came up with why add that? And then the notes say follow up to come, where language came from, and think they, I think Bailey said she was thinking more it had to do with the roads.
So this is still under cluster.
Yeah, this came from me, if I recall,
Okay.
because you can't just put it on the plan and call it good, right? It actually has to get accepted. So a good planning board would put that as a condition of approval anyway, but this is sort of a protection as well to just say, this is all conditioned on town meeting approval. And I don't think it's about the roads, it's really about the open space. So if there's recreational land being preserved or whatever.
And then I had notes also on the same page where it says there was concern with the Airbnb, bed and breakfast, boarding homes were not included as a section.
Say that again?
So people had mentioned something about the Airbnb concerns. And then the other section was where the bed and breakfast and boarding homes, and those were not included as a definition under their own section.
But they are back here.
Okay.
Yeah, they're in the back.
Doing the definitions part?
Yep.
Okay.
But are they in the table, I guess is the question.
They are in
They are on the table.
Yeah,
I think this question was like if there was any other specifics to those, but okay.
Yeah.
And then I'm on page 3861. And under section 38.9.9 recreational vehicles. In relation to a non-paying guest. My notes are suggesting that with the recreational vehicles to make it explain clearer, because a lot of people still question about whether or not they can have an RV parked in their driveway and someone actually questioning me about one that's in town. That is paying rent, they're paying rent. So I didn't know if there was a clearer definition for those, or if what we have is sufficient enough. From what we talked about before.
Well, first, I'll just say that this is an example where our definition of days works against us. Because now we're allowing RVs to be there for as much as 3 weeks or whatever.
So recreational vehicle is defined in the back.
Yes.
I think it was on the owner of the recreational vehicle, I guess, is what the question, where they didn't feel it was, discussion didn't feel that, felt that it needed a clearer definition.
So that
What about changing owner to occupant?
the occupant of the recreational vehicles and non-paying guests.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that clarify? Okay. All right, what else we got?
On page 3863. Under the section 38.9.12 home occupations. Someone had a concern that there was a double negative in that section 1. Yeah, I think that was yours.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't like double negatives. Yeah, they get positives, you know, to think.
Which one are you referring to? Point what?
Point one,
Do not.
point one, point one.
Point one, point one.
Do not employ any persons who do not make the residence their permanent home.
You can't employ anybody who lives in a house.
That's what it sounds like.
That's what it means. Oh, yeah,
Do not employ any persons.
that's what it means.
Can't employ people.
Those are the
No,
ones that don't require a permit.
No.
If you have two other, but if you, as you go down, home occupations that you have 1 or 2 hired people, you've got to get a permit for, but you can run a home business if you don't employ anyone else and meet these conditions up top, you don't need a permit from either the code enforcement officer.
Yeah, so
So she
Employees
changed
have
that,
to
she
live in your
changed the
house.
rule.
No, there's 2 different criteria. No. There's
That's why I don't like this.
There's home occupations that require a permit and some that do not.
it's so,
If you got a real benign one, and it's just something you're dubbing around with yourself in your own house, and you're not altering the traffic, and not doing that, you don't need a permit. But if you have an employee or 2, and it's more of a bigger commercial venture, you gotta get a permit.
All right, I'm on page 3864. under point 10.
All right, can I pause right here? I just want to make sure we have this in here. I want to make sure there's something in here that says it has to be a use that's otherwise permitted in the zone. In the district. Maybe somebody can help me make sure that something like that is in here. I keep having this issue in other towns where people are like, oh yeah, this, this auto repair shop is a home occupation. And I couldn't do it not as an home occupation, but because I live here, it's okay.
I think it's point 11, isn't it? On page 3864. Well, part of it anyway.
About adversely affecting natural resources or the environment.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm getting at though.
Right.
Look right below it, though.
At number 4, go
Point
down,
four.
go down 4.4, yeah. Does that cover what you want?
Yeah, see, I was close.
Yep, perfect.
Right above it.
Okay. I would have been surprised if I didn't throw this in there, so I just wanted to make sure it was.
All right, so what are we looking at now?
All right.
3864, point 10. It says there shall be no, I have eventual public display instead of no public display. Was that a change that someone made or?
I remember talking about it.
Yeah. And like, basically, I have a star to clarify the intent, like, for example, someone gave a lemonade stand.
I don't think the home lemonade stand would be a home occupation unless it's there for, a significant, relatively permanent period of time.
Okay. So it's okay to keep there shall be no public display?
Yeah.
Right.
Some towns try to split it and say, exempting short-term sales or things like that of under a week. But the problem is, 1 week on, and then you take 2 days off, and then you put the stuff out there again. I just wouldn't go there.
So now on page 3865, one of the things that came up under section 38.9.13, number 5, was where for the individual private campsites, a recreational vehicle tent or similar structure shall not, they're giving them 45 days. So then someone said, well, it could be confusing with the 14 days versus the 45 days.
Because an individual private campsite and having something on the dwelling was 2 different things, I think is what we came up with.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Perfect.
Yeah, and that comes straight out of the state rules as well. The shoreland zoning rules, although we have it general.
And in regards to Article 38.10 signs, the side notes show a question mark about flags. Open sign equals a temporary flag, maybe definition of temporary. And then clarify freestanding versus standing.
What was the point about a flag?
The question was about signs, if a flag is considered a sign.
I don't think flag.
It's exempted under the list of exempted signs,
Okay.
message flags.
Okay. And then the open sign equals a temporary flag. And then do we need a definition of temporary?
We have a definition of temporary sign.
Where are you looking at that, Wes?
3882 in back. Temporary sign erected. That's 90 days. 12 months period.
Okay, good. Yeah, you know, I was looking for it under T, for temporary sign. Okay. So it's there. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
In one of the other towns that I was looking up on their signs, things that codes, they would list after the purpose, they listed every definition of every possible sign you could, you know. It was kind of useful in that way so that you know what banners, what flag, what pennant, what sign area, what canopies, what, you know.
So as opposed to it just being here in back of the glossary, it was
Right,
also
just right
brought
here, right here
forward.
in your purpose so that you could see, and then you go through the permit requirement, and you go through the,
Get lost,
who was it?
get lost, no doubt. Point.
Yeah, I mean, this one town had like, just like, quite a bit of list of different, who knew there were so many different kinds of signs. So they listed it in the body, not in the definitions, is that what you're saying? Yeah, right after that, so they're .2, so after purposes, .2 would have been the definitions of signs, banners, flags, pennants.
I noticed in this final version, well, that there, the charts are missing from the original in the sign code area, that the green is new, I believe, if I remember the color code correctly, and they're just, let me just double check that.
All that was crossed out in red.
Previous. It says new language, green text. So it's this is green text with, you know, red lined through wherever it was located previously. So I just didn't know, you know, what, I don't remember just discussing removing because that's the key. The key indicates that the green text is new language. So when we get to signs, we're not going to get to it today, even though it's on. I mean, I'll look back on my notes. I couldn't find anything, but I probably have more notes. But I just noticed there was a lot. There was a lot missing from the original version with the new language versus what we ended up getting for the subsequent revised. So, but we can discuss that under signs when we get there. Just want to point it out. And we can just, yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking that the reason why I think that was done is because I thought there was more focus that needed to be on that
Focus on
at that time. On the signs part, to go back to what was on the original, so then go back with the planning board to get better details about signs. That's what I thought that was.
Yeah, well, I'm just pointing it out just so we remember to come back to that. What else do you have, Shelley?
All right, so
And we'll make note of Sam's suggestion as well.
on page 3868, my notes say reference electric message signs. Going back to the existing language. And then one of the questions came up was should should be able to change the same sign without a new permit. So if someone's just replacing, okay, for example, is like when you replace the town sign, you're putting the same thing in place to replace it because the wood is getting bad and not necessarily needing a new permit for that new sign.
Or like what Franklin Savings Bank just did.
I don't know.
With their
I
signs?
just said my notes of discussion, just said, someone just said that we should be able to replace the same sign without having to have a new permit.
Did they pull a permit?
Hmm?
Franklin Savings Bank pull a permit?
I don't
I
know.
have no
If
idea.
they did, it would have been denied.
What's that?
It would have been denied if they pulled a permit.
Why?
Because it's lit, it's electronic. No, it's not lit, it's externally lit, I thought. It has
The degrees.
yeah, it had that before and they're allowed.
Yeah, their old one was always internally.
No, but that was not allowed, but the time and temperatures allowed, that's got a separate
It's a message, it's a message.
state allowance for time and temperature.
So are you asking whether this,
I was just saying that that was one of the things that came up into play, and if that's something that could be changed, or to keep it the same for now. And the question came up about the electric message signs. Go back to original language that we had, from the prior, that we took out for that ordinance.
all right, so we'll save those questions for the next meeting. Because I think that there's a duplicate in the sign section as well. I think 0.13 on 3868 is the same as 0.3, so we'll
Revisit that one.
we'll revisit.
Page 3869. Under 36.112. Under number 1, if you go to the last paragraph in number 1, it says his, her findings, and that was just one of the ones that got missed to change it to there.
I would just say regarding findings of fact, just get rid of the pronoun.
Regarding the findings of fact.
That's specific to the code enforcement.
Yeah, that's right. Kristen, you were looking to see if cluster development appeared in it, at any other location within the chapter.
Right, and it doesn't. I really don't see the need to define it.
Okay,
By definition, a cluster development doesn't have a definition because it's intended to be flexible.
okay,
And that section, which is the only place it's used, sort of defines what it is in itself.
okay. Thank you. Anything else, Shelley?
On page 3878, it says, mobile home. Some people define a mobile home as a mobile home, or they call it a manufactured home.
That would be modular housing.
The Marshall Housing's down here.
No, I know. I'm just-
Manufactured is the same
I mean, they're
as,
both manufactured.
manufactured and mobile are the same meaning. A modular is something totally separate, made of stick.
Yeah, modular homes are manufactured house, mobile home specific because it's movable.
But they're also called, like, if you, certain definitions call it a manufactured mobile home, is what their technical definitions are. So some people say, oh, manufactured home, because you have to stop and think, okay, wait, that's not a modular, that's actually a single or a double wide.
Where does it pertain to the rest of the word?
I'm just saying for the definition,
Oh, I don't,
maybe adding manufactured home. On page 3878.
I don't think so, because I think it makes it convoluted, because a modular house is manufactured, so if you just keep them separated as mobile home versus modular house, I think it's better the way it is.
Besides, mobile home is the definition and the term that's used in the state law.
Perfect. All right. And,
My house came from a factory in Pennsylvania,
yeah, it's a modular.
you know, and it was manufactured in Pennsylvania.
Anyway, all right, page 3879, it says, multifamily dwelling. Says a structure, a residential structure, and then I have here, or a lot of record that was added. I don't know who added it.
Or what?
Or a lot of record that was on there, but it was taken out.
Multi-family dwelling.
Yeah, we definitely wouldn't have wanted that in there.
We what, sorry?
Would not have wanted that in there,
Okay, perfect.
because then it would just confuse the idea of a subdivision versus a
Yeah, because it's. there's the-
multifamily home.
Okay, so then on page 3883, under two-family dwelling, a residential structure, we're taking out or lot of record there as well, correct?
You should, yeah.
Originally.
All right, so I think anything I have will be addressed in signs and future items on the agenda. So mobile home parks. So that was, Kristen, you added all that back in by according to state law.
Yes.
And I think what the big discussion was at the last meeting was you wanted more than one zone where mobile home parks are allowed.
Correct.
And there was, so I think we've got, at this point, I think we just have woodland zone. Trying if I get to the. And village. Is that what you recall as well? Okay. And so does that meet the minimum requirement?
Okay, so the version that I have up right now doesn't have them allowed in village. So we want to add them to village.
That's what we voted on at the last meeting, yeah.
Okay.
And that was the only, yes, Sam.
Well, if, like what Mark was saying about maybe dividing up, or everybody has talked about dividing up the woodlands into different zonings, could that be changed into a separate, two different woodlands? If we did that, instead of the village?
I mean, that will be at some point down the road, you know, because it's gonna take the planning board a while to, and probably many meetings to discuss that, maybe so cog, et cetera. So it would be something we amend down the road.
But if the zoning was amended, like Mark had said, then yes, this could be changed, as long as it follows the state statute.
And I think that was the only bit of unfinished business with mobile homes. Wes, do you call anything
I
different?
think that's about it.
Yeah, okay. Accessory dwelling units, we've got 4 minutes left. So, Kristen, a lot of concern. Go ahead, Shelley, I'm sorry.
I just had all kinds of notes on the mobile home parks that we talked about. If we could be more restrictive, someone felt that we could, how would they say it, home-based rule. Where
Oh, that was what I kind of brought up, yeah.
if we have something that's in place, so that was one of the questions. And then about density, because our goal is to keep that, and then form-based codes down the road for that. Are we allowed to do that? And one of the other questions was on page 3856, under section 38.9.5.3, number 1. We looked at with public sewer, a minimum individual lot shall be 4,000 square feet. I had in my notes, we were talking about 20,000.
I have 6,500.
That was the state.
Yeah, we had to go by the state. We wanted larger lots.
Yeah,
We
Yes,
weren't allowed to do them.
okay.
So I think 6,500 was the state.
But I think that was part of the thing that Ethna brought up, that the town, whatever that terminology is, that
home base.
is what she brought up, that the town had the right to do that. And that was one of the reasons why we had her, Kristen.
Yeah, so so Kristen, the conversation got, more towards like quality of life, if we wanted to, require that, a larger, minimum lot size. Because in some cases, the state allows us to be more restrictive than state law, but not more lenient. So not sure how that interpretation, it's like, kind of all coming back to me now. And then the minimum setback distance of each mobile home from its sight lines on 3857, you got 10 feet in the front, 15 feet in the rear, and side of 10 feet. And if that could be increased for the sake of quality of living, aesthetics, that's what we discussed.
And if we do a maximum number of lots,
You can't with a subdivision. Were you able to hear me okay, Kristen?
Yeah, I'm just trying to prioritize answering, and also looking at state law while we do. So the state law minimum for sewered lots is 6,500. We can definitely do that, make it 6,500 instead of 4,000. We're not allowed to make, the ones that are 20 right now, we're not allowed to make anything greater than that.
The on-site sewage?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, what were the other ones?
So-
Oh,
Yes, right there. The
setbacks. Setbacks, I haven't compared these with the residential, like regular stick-built residential setbacks, but we don't want them to be more restrictive than single-family homes or stick-built homes. We are allowed to have a buffer around the whole park, which we have in 0.7.1. We're allowed to go up to 50 for that.
Okay,
So the setbacks right now are more lenient in this, because we have more restrictions on our regular
So
ones.
residential side is 20 feet, road frontage 25, rear is 20.
It's at city limits, so it's at city limits, it's fine.
In commercial.
Downtown commercial,
yes.
So these are zoned for village and
Is that why, I'm sorry,
woodland.
is that why I have a question mark next to the no mobile home parks in regards to the commercial zone? Because those setbacks are smaller, is that why I have that there?
Village setback is the 20, 25, 20.
Right, but,
Woodland is 20, 50, 20.
right, we're not talking about that. I have a question mark in mobile home parks under the commercial field, which you just said was 5, right?
We're not allowing them.
We're not allowed.
No, but I'm saying, is this why I have this in here? Because we were talking about, because it met exceeded those setbacks. Is that why we're pondering this?
I think so.
10, it's 10, 10, 25, so this is less in commercial. Commercial's 10, 25, 10.
Okay. I thought someone just said 5 feet, that's why.
And downtown commercial.
Okay.
All right, so we'll come back to this at our next meeting. It's now after 8 o'clock, so we're gonna stop. So thank you, you're immensely helpful.
Thank you. Next meeting is when, and do you need me there? I assume so.
Yeah, well, we'll accessory dwelling units, and where's the next item on the agenda? So if we want to work it into chapter 38, if you've got a draft you like that you've seen produced by another town. We had a citizen hand us one for the town of York at a couple of meetings ago, because they have a relative that works in the code enforcement department in that town. So, and Lou Libby, what you mentioned, he liked some Kittery or I don't remember. Anyhow, so we haven't set the date for our next meeting.
Well, I will talk to Joe about that then. All
Okay.
right, thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Turn it there. Schedule it next week.
All right. When are your planning board meetings? It's the
Second and fourth. So the 9th and the 23rd, well, we don't do the 23rd.
Thanksgiving, yeah. 16th,
16th would work for
Yeah, 15th, November 15th.
16, Wednesday.
Wednesday.
would you guys, well, I guess, would you guys prefer an earlier time?
5 o'clock is the ordinance committee.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah, well, I asked this the last time.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. So 6 to 8. All right. That's what we'll do.
I don't think you ever have to ask if we would like it early.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what, and we'll see if Kristen's available.
Check it right now.
Okay. So it will, I think we finished up on mobile home parks because she's checking on a couple things, so accessory dwelling units and signs will probably take up the next meeting. I think we've gone through the edits, except perhaps.
Oh, we were gonna come back to cluster 2, right?
I don't think so.
No.
No, she's, yeah, no.
Do we have enough restrictions on
Yes. I'll do it the next.
Yeah,
Kristen can be here 6 on the 16th.
okay. All right. Done.
Thank you.